what has happened to us with electronic media, literally starting with telegraph, is that our sense of time has changed. That we move from one sense of time to another by the fact that we are contracting all distances in time and space, as Heidegger had pointed out. And the interesting thing is, and I'll get into this more later, is that our mode of electronic communication brings us away from written communication. It brings us to a sense of oral, and you can pronounce that the same, but read it two different ways. It returns us to the eye and the ear. Okay? This is an important point, so hang on to that. A point that McLuhan makes very, very carefully in a number of his books is that type as information, in other words, printed books, movable typefaces, has molded our culture into linear thinking. Because that's how we receive information, but that's also how we make information. One after the other. One page, one line, one chapter, one word, and even down to the print where it's one letter at a time. Okay? So it's linear information. This makes us think of information as something that moves through time, past, future. Chapters come before chapters. But there are also other things that happen in that, and I don't have that up here, but it's very interesting to notice that when books become popular, it's right about the time that the concept of privacy also comes into our culture. How about that? Because you can take your book and you can go over here with it and you can read it by yourself, and that becomes the accepted mode of information gathering. You don't sit in a room like this and listen to somebody talk, right? You think, he's written a book, I'll go read that, right? Or I'll Google it and get the Cliff Notes, or whatever it is we do. You see, right now, this is 10th century method of instruction, apart from the microphone. But the microphone doesn't really help, because I can still do it without it. Just means you might have to come a little closer. But it's a rather interesting thing to think about that as how we structure information. And if you just think about the size of classrooms, and the size of auditoriums, the size of theaters, they are the size they are in pre-electronic days because that's how far a voice will go comfortably. Anyway, detour there. Now, another point that can be made is that fashion is actually linear, or was. And that was is very important. But the way we understood, I keep meaning to use this in the present myself, because we're still trying to get away from this, as those of you who are in 424 have heard me ramble on about. We're still trying to get away from this notion that fashion is a linear thing that moves from one phase to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. A somewhat artificial construct that was placed upon it about 180 years ago. We can sort of debate that, and we won't. But basically the idea here is that it's ordered information. It's not necessarily linear information, it's ordered information. It was presented as linear information, right? This was the fashion now, that was the fashion past, this is the fashion coming up, this is the future, it's linear, right? Now, zipping past McLuhan for a second, what we have and where we are right now is what we would call a postmodern condition, which, depending on which art form you're in, is either postmodern, late modern, postmodern, or so on and so on. But let's just stick with the postmodern condition for a moment. And basically what that is, and what was pointed out in '79, just before McLuhan leaves us, is that the information processing machines, what would very soon be known as computers, the proliferation of these, says Lyotard, is going to change how information is circulated in the same way that people circulate, in the same way that sounds and visual images circulate. Now he uses circulate there in the sense of distribution, movement. So, in a way, the changing nature of knowledge, the changing speed of moving people, Heidegger's point, the changing movement of information, everything McLuhan is talking about, is what defines this postmodern situation of non-linear time and space. Okay. So, let's get into McLuhan now. McLuhan's point number one. Technology extends the self. We can talk about every human technology as a way of somehow extending the human, literally, or the human's experience, if you want to get a little bit off the physique. But basically you have things that extend our limbs, our abilities to reach things, our ability to touch things. We can throw a spear rather than tackle a large animal. We can wrap ourselves in skins and woven fabrics rather than have to deal with the fact that our skin is not necessarily the best thing in the world for running around nature in. Our senses have been enhanced in the past several hundred years by all sorts of inventions. I'm wearing one right now. Does anybody know when these were invented? 11th century, 12th century. Lovely invention, still works, right? Hearing aids, sonar, radar, all this stuff that enhances our various faculties. Sight and sound being the main ones, but also the amplification of voice, for example. And of course, then it's the main point for today, which is McLuhan's main point, is that we are also extending our nervous systems. That the writing, the printing, and the recording we do is actually an extension of our brain. It's an extension of memory. And other electronic devices that have arrived basically since McLuhan dies, your laptops, your tablets, your handhelds, your various wireless gizmos, who knows what they are. These all extend your nervous system because they are interactive. You're not just receiving, you're also sending out. So your touch is involved and your give and take is involved. McLuhan's global village is one of his most misunderstood terms. This is often spoken of as a very positive thing. The internet will bring us all into a global village. We all get all warm and cozy and fuzzy and start making hot chocolate for each other. It's just all wonderful. Where in actual fact, what he meant was this is a place where everybody's nose is in everybody's business. He was talking about village mentality not as a secure, safe place, but as a place where everybody knows you and everybody knows what you're doing. Which, if you're even only slightly paranoid, you now realize is a huge problem, and of course with the latest NSA problems we're having, this gets a very sinister note, doesn't it? But basically, somewhere in between, it's the village, it's where everybody knows everybody's business, says McLuhan. Now, another thing that McLuhan points out is that learning how to read as a culture dissolved our sense of tribalism. And that is directly related to the fact that privacy became in vogue, as it were. You don't belong to a tribe if you're an individual. You don't belong to a tribe if you have private space. And And you suddenly belong to extended tribes, if you belong to any at all, because now you are a person who does this or studies that or reads this, and now you belong to a tribe of archaeologists or textile scientists or literati of some kind, or I am a citizen of a college town or something like that. But it's not family, it's not blood. Funny thing about electronics is that they revive this, says McLuhan. They revive the sense of tribalism. Because now you are in one-on-one contact. And it doesn't matter if it's blood or interest or anything. It's the notion of being part of a tribe. You belong to a fixed group that has a membership, that has codes, that has ways of communicating. But the thing about tribalism is not unity. That's another mistake here. That's another problem with the village. It's not all fuzzy and cozy. It's not a better world necessarily. And McLuhan actually himself was turning rather actively against any sort of warm and cozy thoughts about this in his final years. Tribalism, you see, is very violent, isn't it? Think about it for a second. Nationalism, factionalism, sectarianism, balkanization of societies generally involves a lot of violence and bloodshed. And this is not necessarily a good thing. And that's where we come back to Desjardins' talk of the psychic temperature rising in modern media culture. Is that the tribalization of civilization brings with it a sense of aggressiveness. Okay, onward. When we talk about the global village, actually in his later years, or not even in his later years, as early as 1966, this quotation shows up in a talk McLuhan gave, and then he actually brings it into a book in print 4 years later, where he says, no, I don't use that term anymore. It's not really a global village. It's all become performance. It's all theater now, right? It's everybody performing for everybody else. And if you recognize any of the images in the background, you see exactly where this is headed, don't you? Where the ability to project yourself, the ability to perform as an individual for the world, regardless of whether you are a celebrity or a rock star, or just somebody sitting in their room and recording something and then putting it online and then it suddenly goes viral, right? Okay? Some of it better than others, right? So basically, where we're at is we are performing the world with our new technology. And yes, we'll get to fashion pretty soon. But for McLuhan, and where the world had wound up, was that there were no spectators. It was only actors. That when we get to this point of interactive electronic media, we are all acting for each other all the time. And just think about your texting, if you're kind of wondering how that might work. Or if you have posted anything on Snapchat recently. Yes? Well, I got a reaction, all right. All right. Having a burger with my mom, right? And we all go, ooh, she's having a burger with her mom. Yeah, right? Okay, you're clearly with me. I don't have to ask. All right, good. So basically, what has happened in the past 20 years or so, since the internet actually caught root, as it were, our economy has largely been organized around information. The ability of the internet to deliver information has become a way of not just making money, but organizing where money flows. The speed of computers, of course, has changed how stock markets work, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the selling and buying of visual information at high speed. Private identity, pretty much gone. Pretty much gone. All right? The private space of the print world has been gradually disappearing. And I'm not talking about sinister NSA types hacking into everything we do. I'm talking about our willing abandonment of privacy. How many companies have you given nearly all your private information in the past couple of years? How much information have you put online about your private activities? And of course, we might have to put quotation marks around private there. All right? Did anybody, let me see a show of hands. How many of you made a Facebook movie? Does anybody here use Facebook? Okay, it's disappearing among your tribe, I might add. But nobody did a Facebook movie. Okay, maybe it's just us old folk who do Facebook movies. Anyway, I did one. My kids didn't. Now I realize that. Okay, generational divide in electronic media. I have nothing to hide, you see. They might, but okay. You put all your private stuff. It was all pictures of them. What? Okay. You put all your private stuff online. Enough said. Enough said. Friend me on Facebook, you can see my movie. Anyway, there we are, the connectedness and the speed. Okay, which brings us to the third McLuhan cliche. The medium is the message. Which boils down to really one very simple statement. That the effect of a new communications technology is really about what it does to us as a culture, not about what it can deliver. Because it changes how we behave, it changes how we interact, it changes how we know each other. And we can see that if we just go down a list, where we start with an oral culture, where everything is spoken or sung, and everything has to be memorized. And in order to know anything, you have to come close. And you have to be with me somewhere. And I can tell you the story of brave Odysseus, who sailed for a lifetime. Right? But you can't read it anywhere. You have to be by me to hear that. Then we get manuscripts. I can write stuff, but I write it for us. It's handcraft. It's individualized. It's my writing. I could make a mistake, but I might be doing it by dictation. I might be speaking out loud as I do it. It's very tactile. It's very involved. Then comes the famous moment of print. Linearity, duplication, multiplication, privacy. Now we can suddenly run off with our volume of the Iliad, and I can read about Homer's tale over here. I can read about Odysseus, and I don't have to tell you about it. And I can study it. It's mine. Notice what just happened. It went from us to me to mine. It's a big change. It's a huge change culturally. And then, of course, we have the electronic. And it starts with one-way electronic, where you sit there and receive, right? You listen to the radio. You watch the television. You fill in the blanks, that's all the interaction you get. You listen to the play on the radio and you fill in your mind what's going on. You watch on TV, and by inference and by storytelling and narrative, you anticipate and you remember. But that's all you get. But then you get interactive media. Now you can choose, now you can comment, now you can skip, now you can store, you can mash up, hack, and otherwise make your own. Major, major shift and change.